All right, so like I said, there are places in the Bible where you just read, and so many times, if you're like me, you just go like, now wait a minute, what did that just say? I'm not sure that that's even right. And I have often, just to let you know, I've often questioned some of the things that Jesus says in the Bible, because I don't understand it. And what I've learned is he's going to deepen my understanding. And Jesus lived in a culture just like we do, which makes it really important to read the things that he says and try to grasp the things that he says because he understood it. He lived just like you and I live in a real world so that he could show us, that he could help us how to deal with the real world, and at the same time how to know God and to try as best we can to be faithful to him. And so I thought we would just kind of touch on a few of those parables that Jesus tells. If you don't know, at a certain point in Jesus' ministry, he started teaching in parables. And parables are stories. They're made up stories that Jesus uses to try to teach a point. Now, often he's making up stories that would deal with situations that they encounter in everyday life, but he's got a point in doing it. And one of the things that I always think is unusual, you're going to find that in this one also, is most of the time someone in the story represents God. And someone in the story represents, us. And there are other things represented in there also. And this is one of those where you're going to read and you're going to say, now wait a minute, I'm not sure I quite grasp this and get this. And let me go ahead and tell you up front, just to remind you before you struggle with that. I didn't write it. So don't get mad at me. I didn't put it in there. It wasn't my idea to put it in there. That, this is something that Jesus said that he taught. It's recorded. It's in there. So if you want to talk to someone about it that you don't like it or you don't understand it, then I would encourage you to do the same thing that I have done many times. Go to him. Talk to him and say, I don't understand. I don't see why you said this. I don't get what you're trying to say. Rather than just kind of, skimming over it and saying, well, this is something I understand, so I'll just move on with, which I have often done in the Bible. Things I don't quite grasp, just kind of just go on and just say, well, I don't understand that, so let me just move on. And some of these are going to be some of those stories that he puts in there, and he speaks in parables so that the believers, those were his disciples, his followers, so that at the time, so that they would catch some things that they realize he's teaching, but also in this sense, so that those who don't trust him and don't follow him would miss it. That's actually why he does it that way. And he even makes this statement. You've probably seen it in the Bible, plenty of times where Jesus will say something like this. So he who has ears, let him. Yeah, so, because you either get it or you don't get it, and it probably says a lot about kind of where you are. And so if you don't, it's a good time to jump in there and say, okay, well, I'd like to get this. I'd like to understand what he's saying and why he's saying it, to us, trying to teach us something like this. If you've ever heard me do this, I'm repeating myself, but one of my teachers when I grew up that I especially remember, was my third grade teacher, Mrs. Childers. Do you remember Mrs. Childers? Okay, so you don't remember. Okay, so she taught at Easley Elementary School. It was actually there were like 6 elementary schools, and the one that I went to was East End. So she was a third grade teacher at East End Elementary School, and she was one of my memorable teachers because it was just the perfect time, and she was the right personality that I look back and I said, she really taught me some things, and I didn't like them at the time, but she taught me some really important things. So at the beginning of the school year, I have a friend named Bobby Youngblood. He was sitting behind me. He's pestering me, but he's a good friend. And so I decided, I don't know why, but I decided to go up front and go up to Mrs. Childers and say, Bobby is pestering me or whatever he was doing. I don't know what it was, doing something, and you need to, and she cut me off right there. I was stunned. She cut me off when I said, and you need to, she said, don't tell me, young man, what I need to do. I was like, isn't that what I'm supposed to do? Am I not supposed to come up here and tell you what's happening and what you need to do to fix my issues and my problems? Do you ever feel like that? Yeah, that was kind of where I was. And I said, well, that's not fair. And then she taught me this. I've always held on to it. She said, and who told you life was going to be fair? So, I mean, I'm 0 for 2. I'm like, man, what is going on here? She's just kind of hammering me with these things and sent me back to my desk to just deal with it myself. Just, go back there. And she was a great teacher, but she was very straightforward. And she kind of demanded that you grow up some and learn and see things a certain way. And I especially remember that. And when I look in the Bible at a lot of these stories, I realize this is what Jesus is doing. He's doing the same thing to you and I. He's teaching some really good lessons, even though he might be using what you might consider some really bad examples. And if you are at the place in your faith where you say, you can't do that, well, he does, because I understand. There's been certainly a time in my life I was like, well, you can't do that. You're not supposed to do that. You're supposed to, because I had my way of seeing it and my way of thinking about it. And so I thought, God is supposed to see it the way I see it or the way I think about it. And when all of a sudden he says, nope, doesn't work that way, you're going to learn to see it the way I see it or the way I think about it. And that's a pretty hard adjustment for you, but it's such a necessary adjustment. In fact, I put this in your outline. I put there's some tough things that we have to kind of figure out. And the first one is, or hard lessons, I use that word. The first one was this: here's what I want the world to look like, but here's what the world really looks like, right? This is how I want it to be. This is how I think the world should be, but then this is how the world really is. And how do I resolve those two things? Because there's an idea, a philosophy, it creeps into Christianity all the time, that if you just want it to be a certain way, bad enough, it will be that way. You ever kind of come across that or felt that way? Or just, you can as a human being, you cannot kind of will things into being that you want if you just will them hard enough and sincere enough and you just don't let go of it. But the reality is you can go that way and go that way and go that way and just miss the way the world really is. That you need to catch, that you need to understand, how the world really is, how human beings are. That includes God, but it also includes the brokenness of the world. And it's a difficult thing because we want it one way or the other, where God tends to have other ideas. And then here's the second thing, which I think, especially as a Christian, you might struggle with this, and that is, can God work? Can he do something in such a world like this? Because that's my struggle, is I'm like, but if the world's not this way, then how is God going to work? And how can God be, in a sense, true or who he says he is if it doesn't work the way I think it should work? And think about it. This is what Ms. Childers was trying to teach me. That's backwards thinking. The foundation is who God is and how God works. And now your thinking has to adjust. Your perception has to adjust. You have to begin to see things more of how they really are so that you can understand how God works and what God does in the world and what he doesn't do in the world. And that may be difficult for you also, because there are things that we want God to do for us, and a lot of times he doesn't do those things for us, just like Mrs. Childers. So that she's my example, or my parable, but hers is a real story. Okay, so here's what Luke chapter 16 says, and just to let you know, in this, Luke has already been recording a lot of the things, the parables Jesus has taught, and I think it's interesting that this one comes right after the parable about the prodigal son. And because you kind of know the story of the prodigal son, how it works out. And then he comes up with this one that Jesus taught also right after that. This is what he says in chapter 16, verse 9. He says, Jesus told this story to his disciples. There was a certain rich man who had a manager handling his affairs. My initial, immediately I go to, well, the rich man must be God, must represent God in the story, and the manager represents, something to do with us as people. One day, a report came that the manager was wasting his employer's money. So the employer called him in, and he said, "What is this I hear about you? Get your report in order, because you're going to be fired." So in other words, he's heard this report. I know it didn't go through any details But it's a parable, so you have to understand Jesus wasn't teaching the details of finance or anything like that. But there's somebody that is in charge of somebody else's wealth, their resources. He is supposed to be managing it, making it work, and the owner gets a report back that he wasn't doing a good job. He calls him in. He says, "I want you to get your everything in order." This is kind of like bringing accounting, with you in a week or two, whenever they're going to designate. And we're going to go over it. I'm going to take a look at it, but you're going to lose your job. You're going to get fired. So it says in the next paragraph, the manager thought to himself. You ever do this? Okay, you got to figure this out. I'm about to lose my job. What am I going to do? He says, now what? My boss has fired me. I don't have the strength to dig ditches. I'm too proud to beg. I like that. I would have just done it backwards. I'm too proud to dig ditches, and I don't have the strength to beg. So I would have, just put them backwards, but they work out the same way. He says, I know how to ensure that I have, now catch this. He said that I'll have plenty of friends who will give me a home when I'm fired. He's thinking ahead. So what am I going to do in this short interim, to make sure that I'm taking care of myself? Or he sound very much like a story Jesus would. Okay, no, doesn't it? Here's what he says in verse 5. So invited each person who owed money to his employer to come and discuss the situation. He asked the first one, how much do you owe him? The man replied, I owe him 800 gallons of olive oil. Sounds like, huge debt. These were obviously big businessmen. So the manager told him, take the bill and quickly change it to 400 gallons. So he's cutting the debt in half. He's telling him on his paperwork, cut the debt in half, give it back to me, turn it back in. And then verse 7, it says, he asked the other, how much do you owe my employer? He asked the next man. I owe him 1,000 bushels of wheat, was the reply. Here the manager said, take the bill and change it to 800 bushels. So not as big a cut, 20% cut in what he owed, and go back. Now, think about it. It's pretty crafty, right? Because when all this happens, what do you have to worry about? What if someone turns into my master that I've done this, that I've made this happen? So he doesn't just do it with one person. He does it with, the picture is here. He might have done it with everybody who owed. So they're all in on it. So do you think they're going to turn him in? No, of course. Okay, I like that little laugh. Exactly. Why would I turn him in? I just got a 50% cut in what I owe. I just got a 20% cut in what I owe. I'm not turning him in. He's very crafty in what he does. So he's going to take care of himself because these men are going to be indebted to him in a big way, and yet they're going to benefit also. I know you think, boy, this sounds like a wonderful lesson to teach my kids, right? But listen to what he says. The next paragraph. The rich man had to admire the dishonest rascal for being so what? Wow. So this is one of those, I'm just being straight up with you. The first time I read it, I thought it's got to be a misprint, Somebody obviously went in and changed the story. There's no way this could be the story. Why in the world would Jesus tell a parable where normally you're going to assume that the rich man, the one who owns everything, is God, and this represents people, and the rich man who represents God is going to admire him for his shrewdness, for his thinking, and I was just like, I just don't understand it. So you can see why, for 20 years I just skipped over it until you start digging in and you start thinking, okay, what is God trying to teach? What is Jesus trying to say to us when he gives us a story like this? And listen, I think, this is just me, so you may disagree, but this is how I see it as I've read the Bible, studied the Bible for so long. I think what he's saying is the rich man admired him because he's thinking ahead. He's planning ahead. He understands the way people are. He's working that in order for his own future and his own good and to prepare a place for himself. Now, I know you're going to say, yeah, but he's cheating. He's lying. He's deceiving. Yes, that's exactly what he's doing. But the wealthy man understood this, and he admired him in some ways for his shrewdness in life. And to me, that kind of smacks to me, because I'm like, now wait a minute, but what about? And as if I don't do that to some extent in life, or you don't do that to some extent in life. In fact, I would say as human beings, we tend to do something like that without necessarily even thinking about it or planning for it. But I think it points to, which I think Jesus was trying to point to, what's your future? What are you building your future upon? What sort of riches or resources do you believe give you a future as far as God is concerned? Because most of the time we're just looking at the immediate, and we tend to bypass that part of it. So if you're mad at me already, just like I said, I didn't write it. Here's what he goes on to say. He says, and it is true that the children of this world are more, say it with me, more what? Shrewd. That he's talking about those, not the children of light, not the believers, but the ones that this is their life, this is their world without God. They're more shrewd in dealing with the world around them than the children of the light. Here's the lesson. Use your worldly resources, Jesus speaking, use your worldly resources to benefit others and to make friends. Then, when your earthly possessions are gone, they will welcome you to an eternal home, or it could be translated, they will welcome you home to an eternal place. Wow, I mean, it's a pretty vivid lesson, isn't it? Because what he's emphasizing, whether you like the story or not, what he's emphasizing is you live in a world. You have resources in this world. You do, we all do. You have skills, talents, gifts. You have a place that you're born into, maybe, some sort of culture that you're born into. All these things are just things that God has given you for you to manage, much like this man. What he was managing didn't belong to him, so it's part of the picture. You have to admit that, he's kind of pointing out the fact that you're managing these things. You may work to help try to build them, earn more, make more of what you have, but you're still having to manage the things that God has given you. And he's asking this question, and he's pointing this out. How shrewd are you in that? How much do you understand about why God has given you what you have, who you are, personality, gifts, skills, possessions? How much do you understand that one day the owner who gives you those things has the right to call in the books, say, how have you used them? How have you managed these, in your life? And I think that's exactly what Jesus is pointing to, that need for us to be honest and to be clear and not to get caught up or not to make the mistake of thinking whatever you have, whether it's, money, possessions, personality, character, intellect, maybe you have appearance. All of those things are just for a short period of time. None of those things go very long relative to eternity itself. So how are you using that to build an eternal existence for your life? Jesus would put it this way. He would say, listen, in this life that you live, don't spend your time trying to get rich in this world. Now, he's not saying anything wrong with money. He's gonna reiterate that, not saying there's anything wrong with getting rich. Just don't think that's the end. Instead, take the riches of this world. That would be all those things that I just named. Take those things and build for yourself wealth in heaven, an account in heaven. It's a place where you're going to go and you're going to spend the rest of your life, and you have used those things to build something that outlasts the temporary things of this life. Kind of stunning, isn't it? Because it's not the way we normally live. And I think it's interesting that he says that in one sense, that the people who live in this world and for this world are sometimes shrewder, craftier about how to do that, he says, even than the children of light. Sometimes, I guess this is because of other things that we believe or how we see it, that we don't think as much about that maybe as we should. And the person who doesn't have a relationship to Christ, doesn't have the promises of God to look forward to, may be working harder at it, trying to use what he has to make something that would last than sometimes we do. I think that's a stunning statement, and kind of, for me, it just kind of smacks me in the face and says, so how are you doing, with what I've given you? How are you doing with the resources and the opportunity and the skills? Because they'll quickly be gone. I mean, there'll come a time when you'll say, I had all these things, I had all this opportunity, and now that opportunity is passed me by. What did I do with the opportunity? Did I build riches or wealth that will outlast this life and this world and will be a resource for me in the future as far as my relationship to God is concerned? Then he goes on to say this. So here's his explanation, right? If you're faithful in little things, I know sometimes I'm going to read this and you're going to say, are you sure this is attached? But so think about what we just said and then kind of try to see what his explanation means with that. If you're faithful in little things, you will be faithful in large ones. But if you are dishonest in little things, you won't be honest with greater responsibilities. I know you're saying, but isn't that kind of an indictment on the story he just told? Actually, it's not. What he's saying is that the manager kind of understood there were things that would outlast where he was and what he had. And so he was thinking of greater things, and he was thinking about how to use the smaller things where he was right then. Now, he was dishonest. He did the wrong thing. The Bible's clear about God condemning that. But he's still thinking ahead when he does this. And he says in verse 11, and if you are untrustworthy about worldly wealth, the things God has given you now, if you can't be trusted in worldly wealth, he says, who will trust you with true riches where? In heaven. Whoa. I mean, it's kind of stunning, I think. And if you're not faithful with other people's things that don't belong to you, things that, have been given to you to manage and to deal with, why should you be trusted with things of your own? Again, I think it's a picture where he's pointing one to the other, back and forth with these things. And then he adds this, all part of the same thought. He says, no one can serve two masters. You will hate the one and you will love the other. You'll be devoted to one and you will despise the other. You cannot serve both God and money. So he's right. It's sort of like saying you cannot live for this world and for these things as if this is everything that there is. This matters more than anything else, and live for the kingdom to come. And you can't live for the kingdom to come and at the same time live and say, but this is all that matters. Because they're in direct opposition with each other as far as how you understand them and how you will work for them and how you will do things as far as those things are concerned. I think it's important. I think it's one of those things that you and I have to wrestle with and that Jesus constantly goes to and he deals with because he loves us, he cares for us. He built us for more than just this world. This world is wonderful. Listen, I love this world. I'm grateful for the things I have. I'm grateful. We were just talking with some friends a couple weeks ago, talking about living where we live. We live in a wonderful place, don't we? In fact, it's, perfect. There's nothing ever that goes wrong here. Okay, no, it's not. It's a wonderful place to live, and there are many wonderful places to live in the world, But the question is, what are you really living for while you're there? How do you and I see it as, why am I here? Who put me here? Why did he put me here? Is there a plan? Is there a reason for me being here? Because if you don't ask that question and you don't deal with that question, then you'll miss the opportunity that you have to build more in your life or to work toward what God has as far as more in your life is concerned. So let me jump to one other passage. For some reason, I decided to really make this even worse. No, I'm sorry, just try to clarify it a little bit. And so Paul writes to Timothy, because this was not a theme that just you find with Jesus. Of course, he taught it to his disciples, to his followers. They carried the same theme forward. I know it's not always a popular theme. And as a matter of fact, there are Christian ministries that would absolutely focus what they do against what he just taught. Because they get confused, I understand that, and they think this is all there is, and God loves you, so God wants to make this world the best it can possibly be, and you should focus just on this. And that's actually not what he taught. He didn't teach that. I remember years and years ago, there was a guy I was listening to I don't remember if it was on TV or radio, but I'm sure it was on one or the other when they did this. And he was just passionate. He was full of life and full of energy. And he was talking about, don't you love this? God has $1 million for you, every one of you that are a Christian. $1 million for you. Boy, he is passionate about it. And he says, and if you don't want yours, I'll take it. And I'm thinking, okay. So here's what I said even then. I thought, gosh, why in the world would you lower God to such a petty goal in life when God has so much more for us in life? But if we get our focus on the wrong things and our expectations on the wrong things, God, this is the way the world should be, then we miss what God has for us. I was a friend sent a summary on the life of Rockefeller, who was the first billionaire ever in the world. And as he talked about his life that is documented, he said, here are the things you got to remember about the richest man in the world at the time. In his latter years in life, his latter whole section of his life, he had to eat a very bland and a boring diet because of all the stomach issues that he had, stressing over all that he had and trying to keep it and making it work. He didn't enjoy that part of life at all. He didn't sleep well at all. He was constantly having to be medicated and trying to find rest in his life. And he had to operate for the latter part of his life with a large number of bodyguards who went with him everywhere he went, almost like in prison, so that he wouldn't be either killed or kidnapped or anything like that, or they wouldn't rob him. Wow, what a wonderful life, right? Think about your life. Because in one way, you and I would look at a man like that and say, oh man, I wish I had what he had. Would you want everything that goes along with it also? You would probably say, well, no, that's not, what is that word again? That's not fair. I want what I want, and I want it to work the way I want it to work, but I don't want necessarily what comes along with it. And yet God offers us so much more. So much more than just the things that people are, as Jesus said, the thief comes to kill and steal and destroy. But I came to offer you life, and to offer that life what? More abundantly. Yes, a better life, more of life. And sadly, I have to admit, it kind of, irks me when I hear somebody says, so he's talking about more money. No, he's not talking about more money. If he was talking about that then he would have canceled out everything he just said. He's not talking about the temporary things. He's talking about eternal things. What you should be grateful for, which is exactly what the Bible teaches, is that you have enough. You have enough to eat. You have a place to live. You have clothes on your back. And use all of that you have and build for yourself relationships and friendships with God and with people. Say that's more important, that's more lasting than just the stuff in this world, the stuff in this life. So I'm gonna live for the greater stuff, the bigger reward, rather than just the temporary. I'm doing this all to set up. This is what Paul writes to Timothy. This is in the 6th chapter of 1 Timothy. And the people he's talking about when he says these people, don't you like when people do that? Those people. So he's talking about people who don't see it that way. They don't understand it. And so he says these people always cause trouble. Yeah, they have a different goal. They have a different understanding of what life should be about. Their minds are corrupt. They've got it all backwards, He says they have turned their backs on the truth. To them, a show of godliness is just a way to become what? Yeah, just to make money. That's their godliness is just a way to put on a show so that they can work their way into the right crowds. In some way, they've decided this is the way to make money. And then he does this. I love this when he says in verse number 6, he says, yet true godliness with contentment. And he says, when accompanied by contentment, is itself a great wealth. It really is this incredible treasure, this sense of knowing God, following God, trusting God, when it is accompanied by contentment in this life, in this world. He said it really is a wealth. He says, after all, we brought nothing with us when we came into the world. We can't take anything with us when we leave it. So if we have enough food and clothing, let us be, here's that word again, let us be what? Yeah, be content. But people who long to be rich fall into temptation and are trapped by many foolish, and harmful desires that plunge them into ruin and destruction. For the love of money, not money, but the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil. And some people, craving money, have wandered from the true faith and pierced themselves with many Rockefellers, many sorrows, many harms, many plagues, many disasters, you know. Now you might be thinking, well, you think that you don't have, no, listen, I understand the desire. I understand the pull. I understand the want to, because we live in a world where, you know, if I was incredibly wealthy, you know, I might walk into some place, and it's always kind of the funny thing to me is how stores and businesses, wealthy people walk in and they give them things for free. And you would say, well, they don't need it, but it's just a way to try to, you know, enrich themselves by working that out and dealing in that way. God doesn't work that way. You know, God draws us to himself. He gives us promises that we can count on. He said those promises are better than the temporary promises of this world and of this life. And if you can live by those, if you can battle through them, and it will be a daily battle, listen, going through them. But if you can battle through those, you can find the life that you were looking for. You can find the life that satisfies, and you can spend your time building things that are eternal in life, that matter in life, not just temporary things in life. So let me jump to one other parable. This is in chapter 18, and so if you didn't like that one, you'll probably like this one. No, you probably won't like this one either. Here's what Jesus does in chapter 18. This is another really good one also. He says, one day, Jesus told his disciples a story to show them that they should always, say this with me, they should always what? Pray. And that they should never what? Always pray and never give up. I think that is so fitting with the one that we just looked at, because of the fact that this is our struggle. He said there was a judge in a certain city, he said, who neither feared God nor cared about people. A widow of that city came to him repeatedly saying, give me justice in this dispute with my enemy. The judge ignored her for a while, but finally said to himself, I don't fear God, I don't care about people, but what? This woman's driving me crazy, you know. She's gonna wear me out. She's gonna kill me if I don't do something, you know, for her. So he says, so I'm gonna see that she gets justice. Right reason, but I know that you're gonna say, so does this judge represent God? In this case, this judge does not, so just to let you know. But he's just saying in the world, there are people like that. You can wear them out, you can beat them down, and eventually they give you the right thing, not because they care about the right thing. They're just tired of you just wearing them out and not shutting up. So he says, I'm going to see she gets justice because she is wearing me out with her constant request. Then the Lord said, learn a lesson from the unjust judge. Bad example, but a really good lesson to learn. Listen to this. He says, even he rendered a just decision in the end. So don't you think God will surely give justice to his chosen people who cry out to him day and night? Will he keep putting them off? I tell you, he will grant justice to them quickly. But when the Son of Man returns, how many will he find on the earth who have what? So what faith means in this case is that you still go before him. You're still imploring him. You're still crying out to him. You still believe that God is a just God, so you pursue him. Here's what I've noticed. You may, if you have a contradiction to this, I'd love to hear it, but here's what I've noticed. When people get their eyes on the wrong thing, when they take their eyes off of God and they get their eyes just on the world, they don't really cry out to God anymore. Because they don't see that as the goal or the destination anymore. They spend their time instead, you know, in a sense, kind of crying out to the world or working in the world, because that's where they think they will find the satisfaction of their life. Got to work in the world. Just let you know, I'm not one that'll be sympathetic with you if you don't want to work and you don't want to be hard and you don't want to be shrewd. You should learn to be shrewd to an extent. to say, this is the way the world works. I've got to learn to work within this world, but I'm going to still seek greater things because I know this is not going to satisfy me, and I can learn a lot of lessons in life, living in this world, as long as I let God and I trust God, God to teach me and to move me forward. But you don't stop praying. You don't stop the relationship that you have with God, because that's the goal. That's the destiny. That's the determination, really, of who you are and how you're shaped on the inside. If you let the world shape you, you will not end up in a good place. You'll end up in a bad place in life. But you let God shape you, and everything changes. And then what happens is the thing of this world, they don't have a hold on you. You may hold some of those, but they don't have a hold on you, because you're not looking for just the things in this world to satisfy you, because you know that eventually they won't, and they won't last, and they'll go away. So you don't hold on to those things. Instead, you hold on to what is eternal and what's going to last, and it changes you on the inside. So let's pray together. And as we pray, it's always good to start and say, Lord, here I am. This is who I am. This is how I see life. And where I'm convinced that I'm not seeing life the correct way, we just studied 1 John a couple of weeks ago. You go and you confess to God. Say, God, I realize I'm off base. I'm looking for the wrong things. I'm glad to live in this world. I pray that you would give me strength to live in this world and to do a good job and to work hard. But also, Lord, that you would fill me with an understanding that life is more than just the things of this world. I don't want to love things, because I have a chance to love you, and I have a chance to love the people that you put in my life instead. And I know those are the things that will last, where the things of this world will just go away. It's hard. And Father, I'm grateful that you do understand, that you know how hard it is for me. It's such a temptation for me to go after and to chase the wrong things, but the truth is, every time I do, it just does not bring any kind of lasting satisfaction. And every time I chase those things, and it costs me the things that matter, I just end up feeling more empty, looking for something else to fill up this part in my life that should be filled by the things that are true riches in heaven, true riches with you, truly the same things that Jesus taught his disciples to chase after and to pursue. So Lord, would you work inside of me? Would you forgive me for chasing the wrong things, even though I know I'll still do it? But would you forgive me, and would you continue to teach me and move me forward so that my life could be a life that is spent and invested in the things that last forever. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.